So you guys should remember my first video was really me hanging up these frames and showing you how to do it on an angled ceiling with a laser level. But the reason that you might see a bit of an offset there is because just in case this beam ever needed to be changed, that was the case. Now I noticed a bit of splitting and there was a chunk here that was missing, but if you look right here, somebody decided that they wanted to just caulk and paint over a wire. So I'm thinking, oh, that's probably some old wire. That's live, dude. Now I put a screw here just to kind of support it. Holy crap. If I had put a screw through that, that would not have been a good time. Do not let anybody stupid work on your power. Obviously this isn't my building, but holy shit, that can get somebody hurt or cause a fire. Not good. So besides the fact that they cut out the majority of this, meaning that the tensile strength is not what it's going to be as a full beam, they also pretty much just left everything as drywall and pretended and painted over it to make it look like it was one full beam. It is not. So don't do this. Build it the right way the first time. I'm gonna see how I'm gonna fix this. Now I totally get that knob and tube is 100% able to be left in place and you can just splice stuff into it. What exists can exist, you just can't add anything to it. But I don't understand why when they were making these walls, why they didn't just take that wire and just clip it and, you know, connect it behind the wall or just fasten it behind the wall. I'm assuming this is like an original beam, but they definitely could have moved this somewhere safe out of the way. So if you look right here, you can see kind of the connection point of where the piece of wood is here. What you can do is to find the angle right here. You can obviously tell that it's not 90. So from here, you're gonna bring the pivot point right up and then you're gonna turn at the pivot point until the top of your square is right parallel with the line that you're going to cut. Now, if you look down here, these are the degrees. So if you look to make it parallel up here, right, you're gonna find that it's 68. So you count 3 notches after 65. And so this right here is a 68-degree angle. And if you don't believe me, you could, of course, use a miter protractor or an angle finder, make that connection, and you'll see that it's 3 notches after 65 or 68 degrees. So either way is going to give you the accurate result. And then all you have to do is measure the gap and measure the height, and it will tell you how much material needs to be cut out. So make your measurement up on the side here so we know the height. Make your measurement across. You got 3/4 of an inch here, and that's all there is to it. Once you know the angle that you're going to be cutting, you know the thickness across the gap, and you know the height that needs to be filled in, you have all your measurements. So let's take that onto a scrap piece of wood so I can show you exactly how this needs to get measured up. Now here's what the deal is, and just to show you, this is what happens when you start eyeballing stuff and just making cuts like that. So if you're not going to be tracing, let's be a little more accurate. So let's start with making your mark. Now if you're going to be using a longer piece like this, all you have to do is from the edge, let me just give you some zoom in action. So we're going to rotate from the pivot point. It's going to be 68 degrees. So all you have to do is just turn it so that this pivot point is still touching the top of your material, but down here, you're going to look for 68. So once we know we're there, we can make our first line, right? And that's a 68-degree line. Now, because the thickness of the material, and I've measured it, is 3/8 of an inch, just to show you from that tip to here, that's 3/4 of an inch. You would then take 3/4 of an inch from where that line is drawn, which is right here, and then slide over, and then from that point where I made my mark right here, you're going to then again make a 68-degree line. Once that's lined up, you make your second mark, and that's all there is to it. You're going to cut here and you're gonna cut here. And this is the piece that's going to fill it. Just to show you something like that. Now, obviously this is just a cross-cut section. Obviously, depending on how much material you need, 2-3 inches, you're gonna be cutting what you need to cut. This is just a better way to visualize it. If you have a miter saw, by the way, you are one step ahead of the game. But what happens if this is the only amount of scrap wood you have? Obviously, you don't want to sit here under the miter saw and bring the miter saw right next to your hand. That is a sure way to lose something. So if you don't mind, and if you have a scrap piece of wood like this, it's better to go in the middle if you're using a miter saw. Right? So let's say this is what you needed to use. You'd be able to make your initial cut here and then still have some play with the amount of material you can use with a clamp to make sure that your hand is nowhere near the material that's getting cut. Safety first, people. Now, when you're putting in your wood insert, obviously like any other miter connection, you want to make sure you're gluing those connections. So put glue, wood glue, wood glue. Do not stick a bunch of crazy glue or tacky grease or anything else. Wood glue. Bond those two pieces and make sure that you have a sharp chisel. Go in there, make sure it's super clean so that when you push in that new piece, it slides in like it's meant to be there. None of that cheap stuff. Don't just grab it, grab a hammer, pound it in. No, nice, take your time. This step, prepping where the wood piece is going to go, is the most important piece. Just as important as making sure the piece fits. I am going to slightly paint over this. However, I am going to leave like a painter's tape little note that says live with a little lightning bolt, just so that anybody cutting, myself included, doesn't forget that this is here. As you can see, this is old knob and tube. The rubber is still over it. However, the cloth is way too old and coming apart. Now, once you spackle or caulk any cracks or anything that might be in the beam, you're going to take your sandpaper. I don't care what you use. I went in with a 220. Make sure everything is nice and smooth, right? And then make sure it's completely dust free, and then we can come in with our paint. And then once everything is set up, you just give it a coat of paint. Doesn't look the worst, doesn't look the best, right? Let's not try to stare at it too much. But the reason it's showing that really bright line right here is just because of the way the light's hitting it. Ziggy's kitchen off. Right, so it's just a shadow line because there is an offset from this beam being a little bit lower. There's nothing we can do about that little mound. And so I am going to put a little sticker here that just says live in case anybody happens to kind of snip that little mound. We don't have any issues. Also, in case anybody cares, what I did was I put a nail from this side going this way, from this side going this way. So they counter each other. And then I used a rotary to cut off the extra instead of just tapping it and putting more trauma into the wood. Cutting off so it's nice and flush before painting. So once this is dry, get another coat, and this should be better. Again, the only way to fix this truly would be cutting this ceiling, cutting that ceiling, cutting that back wall, and then replacing this whole stud with one solid piece, but not without having to resect that electrical line. So this is as good as it's going to get without any major demo work. This is not my property. I am not paying for that, but just a quick tip if you need to fix a notch. With that being said, you have yourself an excellent day and work smart.